Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your questions, hot takes, observations, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. I was really surprised, pleasantly, at just how many comments there were this week for the mailbag, considering there haven't been any big events in the last couple weeks. It's the start of Laver Cup today, but usually this is a time in the calendar where a lot of people disengage, disconnect, take a little bit of a breather. Apparently, not the listeners and viewers of Monday Match Analysis. So I appreciate you all, and it's going to be a great mailbag as a result. I pulled 25 out of something like 160 comments that were left on the YouTube post this week, formerly known as the YouTube community tab. So thank you all for that. It's going to be a fun time. Housekeeping before we get going. Again, Laver Cup starts today. Normally, I don't really cover Laver Cup. I don't feel the need to, considering it's an exhibition. So I often don't cover it as if it's like a serious, real event. Even though it does blur the lines in some ways between exhibition and real event. Anyways, Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy are in San Francisco at the event in the flesh. So I'm going to do an episode of 3 on Monday with Joel and Amy, where we'll talk all things Laver Cup. Any other housekeeping? I didn't take any of the Taylor Townsend comments. What she said was insensitive and disappointing. And she took full responsibility for it. And she said that she would be better, that she would learn from it. She did not make any excuses. She apologized. And I'm just not a huge fan of the pile-on at that point. Like, we can break down all of the reasons why disparaging the cuisine of a country that is foreign to you as an individual is not a respectful thing to do. I just don't think that's really super necessary. So I think, Taylor messed up. Learning experience, hopefully, for her and maybe for others who have observed this entire saga. And that's it. I'll just say Chinese food is beautiful and perfect. All right, let's get to the first comment. It's from Stalin Lobo. What went wrong with men's tennis players from the 1990s? Was the dominance of the big three a legitimate explanation for their Grand Slam level failings, or was it a means of avoiding poor performance? Well, I think if I'm answering this question in a literal sense, I think there's obviously shared responsibility for the slam failings of the players born in the 1990s, meaning for the first half of many of their careers, it was the big three, and especially Novak Djokovic, who extended his career as a regular major title winner, past the point that would have been reasonably expected. And Rafa did that a little bit too. Roger did it, but earlier on, so it's not as pertinent to this question. But then obviously Sinner and Alcaraz have now become the main obstacle. So it's absolutely shared responsibility. It's not necessarily a big three thing. But if you're asking me for like this overarching umbrella analysis of why they failed as a generation, well, I find that really difficult to do. Like, it's way easier to go on an individual by individual basis and to poke holes in their game and to say, well, this is why they are not what the big three and Sinner and Alcaraz are. The big three, Sinner and Alcaraz, are players with a lot of very, very special strengths and basically no significant weaknesses. So there are no major holes and also significant strengths. That's what they are. They are almost perfect tennis players. They are generational packages of tennis player. And it's so much easier. Like, it's not hard to go individual by individual and to say, well, you've got that issue. Or, like, for example, let's take Medvedev. Daniil has always been a little underpowered off the ground, no transition game, and therefore, once he gets into rallies, it's hard for him to do proactive damage, right? Or Tsitsipas, Always had issues returning on the backhand, defending on the backhand. Never really developed a backhand slice to protect the limitations of his drive. That was a major hole. Then there are guys where it's not really that there's a huge hole, but there wasn't enough explosiveness, or there weren't enough special strengths like a Nishikori or a Ferrer. I know they weren't 90s born, but you know what I mean? Like, you can go individual by individual, but from the Raonic to the Zverev to the Rublev to the Dimitrov, you can go back further, Tsonga, Gasquet. Like, it's very easy to look at these players and to just see, like, well, this is why they're not at the level of big three Sinner, Alcaraz. They don't have that package in them. But if you need me to, like, paint them with a broad brush, is particularly the 90s, there is one dynamic that I believe was absolutely poisonous to all of them, which is that when they were young, developing players, they were anointed as next. This is not new analysis. Many of you would have heard me say this before, but they were anointed as next. They were told that the big three are aging and that it's going to be big three out and they will run the show as soon as the big three are gone. They were fed that. They were spoon-fed that narrative, inundated with it. I believe that they believed it. And it was a very convenient thing for them to believe. But I think it may have stunted their development at that crucial stage, early 20s, when they were content with not winning. All right, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, too good. But when they're gone, we'll be fine. That was the fallacy. But how much did that hurt the level of ambition when it comes to development? What the big three, Sinner and Alcaraz, have all had was a hunger to improve so rapidly that nobody can even catch them. Obviously, some of it is just natural ability and what they've been given in that respect. But then another part of it is, yes, absolutely, just like this tenacity in terms of developmental curve that Tsitsipas, Zverev, Medvedev, none of them really had that. All right, next one from SVManQ. Hi, Gill. In my eyes, Kevin Anderson is one of the most statistically interesting tennis players ever. Out of his mere 7 career titles, his biggest is the 500 in Vienna. He never made a Masters final, and he had a combined 5 wins against the Big Four, and yet he made 2 Slam finals in a time when most players were lucky to even get 1. Since I never got to watch his game, can you help me understand what made him so special and how he was able to achieve such success at the Grand Slam level? Also, could we somehow make a case that he is the most successful tall guy in tennis history? To me, tall guy means 6'7" and above, or does that honor belong to his most similar contemporary, John Isner? As always, thank you for your insight. Love your content and keep up the amazing work. Isner versus Anderson career comparison. That's a... without looking into it, that's a tough one, actually. John won a Masters 1000, so Isner's won a bigger title. And I actually think Isner probably had a slightly better career if you just look at like consistency of year-end rankings. But let me just take a look at that real quick. By the way, the 6'7", it's interesting. Like, there's been so many great 6'6" players. Del Potro, Medvedev, who's the tallest, world number 1 in ATP history. Obviously, Zverev. I guess then there's a lot of 6'5" players, right? I think Safin was 6 foot. Maybe he was 6'4". Anyway, let's see. Year-end rankings. Year-end rankings for John. Yeah, I mean, John was in the top 20 so consistently. Kevin Anderson was not. I mean, John, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 consecutive top 20 seasons for John Isner. Like, Anderson had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total top 20 seasons. So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that Isner had a better career. And he won the bigger title, John. In terms of Slam success, I mean, you're right. it does feel like making 2 major finals was a massive overachievement for Anderson. It definitely was, considering he only made 3 quarterfinals. He only made 3 Slam quarterfinals, but yet he made 2 finals. Think about Andrei Rublev. He's made 10 quarterfinals and hasn't made a semi. Wild, wild stuff. If my memory serves, the draw for Kevin was just really nice for him at the U.S. Open. I actually was able to pull it up just now. So, he got Query in the quarters. I think Sam recently made an Instagram reel about that match. This is probably a big opportunity for Sam looking back. Then he got Carreño Busta in the semis, and then he got blown out by Nadal in the final. He also got blown out by Djokovic in the Wimbledon final. So both times he found himself in a major final, he was like pretty thoroughly outclassed, which is not his fault, but it just goes to show you that it's just 2 tournaments where he kind of was able to overachieve. He faced Paolo Lorenzi in the 4th round. Oh my goodness. Coric in the 3rd round. He beat Ernest Golbis in the 2nd round, and he beat JC Aragoni in the 1st round. Oh my God. What a run. 2017 Kevin Anderson at the US Open. I don't know why. I'm just getting such a joy out of the names that he went through. But yeah, that was really good draw luck. Of course, Wimbledon, he had the Federer win. He had the Federer win in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. Then he got to play John Isner in the semis. And obviously that was just a hold fest. And then I think Anderson won it 16-14 in the 5th. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's just, there's no explanation for why it happened. It's just some guys have a couple of awesome slam runs that are a little bit disproportionate with what they accomplished in their career. Anderson would be one of those guys. How was he as a player? Did you say that you didn't really get to see him? Yeah, I never got to watch his game, the commenter said. Look, Kevin was kind of one of the first versions of a big server who just played a lot better from the baseline than you would have expected in previous eras, especially when it just comes to his pure ball striking. He was a really clean, consistent ball striker off of both wings. He was happy to stay on the baseline, exchange off the ground, good rally tolerance. The knock on him, what kind of held him back, 0 creativity, no transition skills, brick hands, very mechanical. So he wasn't a great creator of offense once points got going. And then, of course, he was a little bit limited with the movement because of his height. So he was, it was a big serve, consistent off of both wings, a much better baseliner for a 6'7" guy than you would expect in the previous era. But he didn't have that special movement of Zverev and Medvedev. And he also didn't have that special attacking ability of somebody who is going to really take the racket out of your hands on a regular basis, I would say. He was a bit of a tweener in that sense. Also, great mentality, very positive, which he worked on a lot. And there was he became a meme, I guess, later in his career. It was known as Come On Kevin because he was such a positive competitor out there. From Mike. What made Medvedev have a way more successful career than Zverev? They were both close to 2 meters in height with the great serve expected for someone their size, but they were also great movers. Why did Medvedev win a slam, become number 1, and made more slam finals than Zverev if they were similar players and Zverev made it into the scene a few years before Medvedev? Well, first of all, Medvedev has not had a way more successful career than Zverev. Because he's won a major and been number 1, I think it's pretty clear that you take Daniil's career over Zverev's career at this point in time. But if you look at big titles, overall titles, a lot of ranking stuff, it's actually very, very close. In many categories, Zverev actually has an advantage. And from a longevity standpoint, not only did Zverev break through and start winning big titles sooner, but it looks like he potentially might have more staying power than Daniil Medvedev, which means that in terms of a lot of the counting numbers that we'll look to when these two retire, it could actually be that Zverev has the upper hand over Medvedev in many of these categories. So that is worth considering. Why was Medvedev more successful than Zverev? 3 things spring to mind. I think the most obvious one that most people will jump to right away, low-hanging fruit, just felt like Medvedev was a big-time performer who embraced the bright lights and competed well under immense pressure. When Daniil was in his prime, I never felt like he really got super tight. And I just think he brought his best. You could almost see it even as he was declining in his overall game. The Sinner win at the U.S. Open, the Alcaraz win at Wimbledon. He almost overachieved at times in these big matches against top players. Think about that statement. Can you apply it to Zverev? Not really. So I think that big match performer clutch gene trait is something that Medvedev had over Zverev. I would say the other thing that shouldn't be underlooked is just Daniil's ball. Daniil being a flat hitter, a very flat hitter with exceptional depth. I think Zverev's ball, at face value, there is nothing disruptive, or there is nothing particularly disruptive about it. And in general, Zverev's not the most disruptive player. I think the fact that he's going to make 70% of his first serves at 128 miles per hour, like that's disruptive in its own way. But other than that, he is almost impossible to break down, very difficult to get through, unbelievably physical. All of these things are true about Zverev, but not very disruptive. And I think Daniil, there is a quirkiness to his ball where it's like, oh, this thing just, it's so flat. The backhand never misses. It's always deep. And I think there was a level of discomfort that came with just Daniil's regular rally ball trajectory that I think was a factor for him, an advantage over Zverev. Sasha had, I mean, we can get to some, look, there are some things that Zverev does better as well. The other thing, and this is very important, man. I mean, maybe I should have led with this. I don't think we should lump Zverev and Medvedev together defensively. In terms of return and defense, we should not say that they're the same because they're both 6'6" and they wow us and impress us with their returning and their defense. I understand why we lump them together because they are both wildly effective returners and defenders for their height. I get that. They are not the same, though. Daniil Medvedev is a more stifling returner than Zverev in terms of service box coverage, returns in play, and he is a better mover than Zverev and a better defender than Zverev. I know they are both above average and they are both tall, and for that reason, we like to just couple them. They are not the same. Medvedev is a better returner and a better defender. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Next one from Gabamini. Hey, Gill, there's been a lot of talk about Sinner's recent comments that he needs to become more unpredictable, even if it means losing a few more matches in the short term. I know you and Steve Flink have both expressed doubts about this direction, arguing that Sinner will never be able to directly outmatch Alcaraz when it comes to those cat and mouse exchanges. I understand that point, but I disagree with you here. I agree with the premise that Jannik won't be able to match Carlos in those spontaneous improvisational exchanges, but if he implements varied shots from attacking positions, maybe he attacks with a short angle backhand or takes the ball surprisingly early and comes in, rather than just attacking with more time from the baseline. He doesn't really have to go toe-to-toe with Alcaraz in these varied rallies. He's just choosing to finish the point differently. Furthermore, this increased variation will make Sinner's own strengths, his rhythmic power and relentless consistency, even more dangerous. For example, if Sinner starts mixing in a lot more drop shots, then in a rally where he gets a short ball, Alcaraz can't automatically assume a forehand a heavy forehand to the corner is coming. The possibility of a drop shot forces Alcaraz to hesitate, which makes Jannik's trademark power that much harder to defend. So the reason I included this comment is because it's really well thought out, and I agree with it. I don't want to be the guy who's saying that Sinner shouldn't work on his variety. Like, please, I'm going to put my stake in the ground, not what I'm saying, not what I want to communicate. Jannik should work on his variety. What he shouldn't do is panic about the overall identity in his game, right? He should not feel as if he needs to transform his overall sensibilities. He should not feel as if his strengths are insufficient. He should lean on those strengths. He should have confidence in those strengths. He should have conviction in his identity as a player, while continuing to work on his volleys and work on his drop shots and work on introducing more. This is one that I really think is important for him. Work on taking a little bit of pace off and adding some width on the inside out forehand. Drop it short angle in the service box. When he steps inside the court for a forehand approach shot, maybe take a little pace off and roll it shorter angle a little bit more so that he can break the sideline. Work on maybe mixing in something that Alcaraz has done against him. Throw in some higher trajectory, higher spin rate balls in there. These are all things that I think Sinner is capable of, and he should work on it. And it will make him a better player. You know why? It makes everybody a better player to work on those things. And it is accurate to say that the way Sinner plays currently, there is it would be very easy for him to add more of this stuff in, because the idea that he doesn't have a lot of variety, that's not just putting him side by side with Alcaraz. That's true within the overall landscape of the tour. And Tennis Insights did a great post on this that was inspired by Jannik Sinner's quotes after the US Open. Tennis Insights has a metric. There's one side of it, which is variety score, and the other is core shot percentage. So variety percentage and core shot percentage. Any shot that you hit that is a topspin ground stroke through the baseline, that is a core shot. Any other shot you hit, volley, slice, angle, which means it breaks the sideline instead, drop shot. Any other shot you hit that's not a topspin ground stroke through the baseline counts against your core shot percentage, and it counts for your variety percentage. Jannik Sinner was the tour leader in core shot percentage. The leader. So there is obviously opportunity for him to mix this stuff up. And by the way, the fact that Sinner has gotten more of a comfort in doing all of these things, it has already served him well. It is already a part of why he was able to ascend from a tier 2 top 10 player to a world killer. In fall of 2023, go back to those conversations in his wins over Djokovic and his wins over Medvedev, guys who are just absorbing his pace with ease and confounding him offensively. Jannik's ability to leave his comfort zone in those matches were massive for him. I have watched a lot of these recent Alcaraz matches, and I have felt as if that Jannik needs more options to finish, as this highlights. So if that's what Sinner wants to really focus on, I think that's a good move. What he can't do, though, is start to second guess his overall identity as a player. And I guess the reason why I thought the comments were the only level of concern I had for the comments was actually the fact that you don't want a player to start doubting their core strengths and whether or not those core strengths may be insufficient against a rival, right? That shows a little bit of potentially the beginning of some psychological cracks. It's kind of like, okay, but like, like your game is still good enough and really, really good. So you just want to make sure that that inner belief still exists. As soon as it doesn't, I think there's big trouble, right? Like if you have, and I would say this about, there are other hypotheticals that I could throw in there, right? Like if you heard, let's say, okay, how about, let's take Medvedev, for example. When Daniil started saying, I don't have enough power, these balls, they don't go anywhere, I need more power, where it's like, oh boy, like he never had a lot of power. It was never a problem. Now it's a problem that you don't have power. Like that to me was a signal that he was feeling insecure about his game. And yeah, it was like when Daniil started to say those things, it was a bad sign. So that's where you're concerned about Jannik a little bit based on those comments. But I also think the overall mission to be a little bit more unpredictable from finishing positions is a good mission. And I don't want to be the guy basically arguing that he shouldn't be working on those things. All right, from Anthony Wong. There's been some discussion about Italy undergoing a tennis renaissance with 9 men and 3 women in the top 100. Meanwhile, the U.S. has 15 men and 16 women in the top 100, but tennis hasn't risen in American culture the way it has in Italy. What would it take for tennis in the U.S. to have a cultural renaissance like we see in Italy right now? Sometimes I wonder if it would take something as dramatic as an American man and woman winning the U.S. Open in the same year. Would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks. Well, look, Taylor Fritz said it best in the Netflix documentary Breakpoint. He said, an American can be 4 in the world and nobody cares. That's the truth. Nobody cares if you're 4 in the world. Nobody cares. I'm talking about the mainstream sports fan, right? It really does take a perfect storm, I think, to transcend in a way like Serena did. It takes a perfect storm. You need a little bit of cult of personality, maybe a little charisma, and you've got to win majors. I mean, and even then, it might just be that tennis is boxed out of the mainstream, which is okay. Like, why isn't NHL hockey as big as the other 3? And why can't the NBA or anything for that matter compete with the NFL? Some things are just culturally part of the fabric. They are the furniture. They are set in stone. And if my task on this podcast is to explain how tennis can emerge out of, I would say, niche status in the United States, and I have to explain how that happens, like, I don't think I can. I do not know. Like, I don't know. But I don't think I know how the NBA can compete with the NFL either. Maybe some things just aren't to be. And maybe in Italy, the fact that maybe it's about saturation. In Italy, like, football is king, soccer is king. I never know what to call it in the context of these conversations. In Italy, football is king, but apparently, like, maybe there is room for another, a second, a number 2. Maybe in the U.S., there isn't that room. It's too saturated. I will say, though, participation numbers, like tennis participation numbers in the U.S. since COVID have been really, really strong. Despite pickleball being on the rise, despite padel being on the rise, tennis has also been on the rise. So you could say, I think culturally, actually a couple things. I think statistically, participation is up, and culturally, tennis kind of has had a nice little moment. Like, walking around Manhattan, in terms of luxury brands wanting to be a part of tennis as an aesthetic, as far as the U.S. Open being part of the culture, outside of even the sports world, I actually think that tennis has become larger in these spheres than it ever has been. The fact that you walk into a Lululemon and it's Frances Tiafoe and Leila Fernandez. I walk into a random jewelry store. I think it's called like Majuri or something, and it's Emma Navarro. And then I go into Vori and it's Jack Draper. In that sense, like tennis kind of is permeating in a bigger way than I think it ever has with some of these luxury brands. I mean, there are reasons for this, but yeah, as far as it climbing out of niche status, I don't know if that's possible. From Parth, best of 5 and best of 3 matches you've ever seen. I want to kind of go through this one pretty quickly because I don't think there's a need to like go in depth here, but in the flesh, by the way, the best I've seen in person is the 2022 quarterfinal at the US Open between Alcaraz and Sinner, and I was there the whole time until 2 a.m. That's the best match I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. Best of 5, I feel like everybody's in agreement on what the pantheon best of 5 matches are, at least in the 21st century, and I don't have any like hot takes here, so yeah, the Wimbledon final in 2008, Australian Open final in 2012, the Roland Garros final that we just had the honor of witnessing a few months ago. I think best of 3 is a much more interesting conversation. It's actually more fun to remember some of these matches. And a couple of them that I guess I personally love. 2013 Miami Open final between Ferrer and Murray. As a Ferrer guy, to me, that was the highest quality Ferrer match ever. He lost it. Murray won. But I also think it was like the best representation of early 2010s attritional baseline tennis you will ever see. I loved the 2019 ATP Cup match between Medvedev and Djokovic. I believe that was my Monday Match Analysis match of the year. One of the rare occasions, maybe the only occasion, in which I gave match of the year to a non-slam match. The next year at the ATP Finals, there was a team Djokovic match, and I think that was like one of the peak Dominic team matches where it's like, if you want to go on YouTube and be like, this is team at his most ferocious and explosive best, that's a really good one to look at. It was amazing match indoors. And I would also say the Djokovic-Alcaraz match in Cincy, again, like not the highest quality by any means. Definitely wasn't the highest quality. But in terms of like drama and twists and turns, like that was just what an experience it was watching that match. That was just such a unbelievable like roller coaster of a match, and that one sticks out to me as well. Cincinnati, Djokovic, and Alcaraz. All right, next one is from Yeeft. Do you think that press conferences for coaches should be regular, or should tennis still try to keep the gladiatorial 1v1 aspect of the game and not have them most of the time? I personally love hearing what the coaches have to say, and I especially loved Juan Carlos Ferrero's press conference after the US Open final this year, where we could see that he was super satisfied with the match and that the tactics were executed amazingly. What do you think? I've actually talked about this before. I think that coaches should be required to do press conferences in any sport in which coaching is legal. If coaching is legal, then get your behind into the press conference room. Not only is it an interesting perspective, but also I can think of certain player-coach combinations where the coaches are just far more insightful than the player. That the press will get more, and ultimately the fans will get more if the coaches were available post-match. Like, here's a guy, this is not anything against Tommy, because I think Tommy is totally fine in press. I don't think he's like a bad press conference, but his coach is Brad Stein. Brad Stein is one of the most insightful tennis minds and communicators in the world, in my opinion. Do I wish that Brad Stein was forced to do the press conferences? Heck yeah, I do. I want to hear what he has to say. You know what I mean? So I'd be all for that. From Joshua, any good series, books, or music that you've been on recently? So the summer was crazy. I mean, I worked a lot in the summer. And, a lot of my TV watching was totally put on hold. Music is never put on hold, though. Doesn't matter how busy I am, I'm going to find some music. It's been a great summer of hip hop, guys. Great summer. The Clips record, the Clips album is terrific. It's been, a lot of people have said that, so it's not necessarily a deep cut by me. But I've had that on repeat. The JID album, I love. I actually had a period in time where I stopped listening to rap for a while, and this summer I've been kind of back on it because of some of these new, exciting album drops. In terms of a television series, the last one I watched was The Studio, which happened to do really well at the Emmys last weekend, with Seth Rogen, kind of makes fun of Hollywood, very much a slapstick-ish, almost like Curb Your Enthusiasm-esque comedy, just through the lens of the movie making industry. But I enjoyed that quite a bit. Need to get back into TV watching, though. And books, well, Giddy Nathan's The Changeover, the Sinner Alcaraz book. I've been trying to make my way through that little by little, but definitely pick that up. No doubt. From KO Slice, do you believe that Davis Cup is under-promoted? It feels like every year there are unique stories and big upset victories that happen at this event, yet it feels ignored by most tennis fans. The audience and crowd interactions are usually great for this tournament, so it hurts to see it barely publicized. Well, I agree with you overall. I mean, Davis Cup is a really awesome product, especially when it's a home and away tie. So I like the format change that they made this year. They've added an additional round of home and away ties instead of the double neutral site group stage stuff that they were doing before. So that's a good change. It does not help that they have changed the format relentlessly over the course of the last decade so that nobody knows what the hell is going on. So that has hurt Davis Cup, and the calendar spots have hurt Davis Cup, right? It's February, it's post-US Open, and then it's November, after the season. By design, you understand the push and pull, and you see who has more power and leverage in terms of creating the calendar, ITF or ATP? ATP, because Davis Cup is in the three most least desirable calendar spots over the course of our season. So that's a big part of it, I believe. So I don't know that it's necessarily under-promoted. But I'm behind you in terms of the general idea that if fans actually embraced Davis Cup and watched it, the product is really good, really good. I, too, wish that it got more shine. From member Jason, is there a way for Djokovic to play Carlos or Jannik earlier in slams by lowering his rank? Is that fair? Would he want to do this? I think it's going to happen almost naturally for him, most likely. Let's see how much Novak plays post-US Open, but if he continues to play this light a schedule, we will get to a point where Novak drops out of the top 8, and we might get some quarterfinals or round of 16 matches against the big guys. I don't think that helps him win a 25th major necessarily, but it might help him. It might help him play Jannik and Carlos, at least to some extent. Probably happens whether or not Novak wants it to or not. From Matt, hi Gill, in your last video, or better, in your Sinner versus Alcaraz video from 2021, you consider Alcaraz's superior athleticism a huge advantage over Sinner. You said it's a trait that you just can't learn, and that all of the big four had a similar kind of talent. From all of the young and rising prospects, which one would you say is the most talented from that perspective? Do you think Fonseca has it? Honestly, no. Fonseca at this stage reminds me a little bit more of Sinner. I don't think that he has jump off the screen athleticism, but everything else it's really everything else that's so impressive. All of Fonseca's tennis skills, I'm quite enamored by, more so than just the ball striking and the power off of both wings. Even how developed right now, like his net play and his serve, I think all of that is even in a really good place with Fonseca. So it's more his tennis skills. Menchik, not quite. I think if you adjust it for his serve, if you say for his serve he moves this well, yes, it becomes really, really impressive. But that's adjusting it for the serve. If you take just movement alone, like just pure athleticism, my guy is Caboli, actually. Caboli's the guy who I think resembles most closely an Alcaraz type athlete. Waist down, movement only. Yeah, Caboli. From Julius, what's your favorite tennis kit of all time? Mine is 2017 Sunshine Double Federer. Good question. Not something that I normally put a ton of thought into, but I know I was asked this maybe a year ago or something like that, and I landed on Nadal's black and purple, which are my two favorite colors, sleeveless US Open kit. Obviously, Rafa sleeveless, I also think at this point in Nadal's career, Nike wasn't giving him a ton of sleeveless. So when he came out with that, I think it kind of hit different, so to speak. But kind of a personal thing. I don't know. I'm glad that Djokovic finally got a black kit at the US Open this year. He looked excellent. They did a nice job with that. From Antoine. We'll try to go rapid fire here. Hey, Gill, do you think players from major countries such as USA, France, or Spain have an unfair advantage in comparison with players from smaller countries such as Portugal, Hungary, or Czechia, each with multiple players in the top 100, but they don't even have an ATP 250? I know you can't do anything about home court advantage, but I believe we should make wildcards more diverse. Thank you. Look, home court advantage in tennis in terms of I'm playing in my home country and that's going to help me win the match. That is very murky areas. There are some players, for example, who just play worse because they're under more pressure and there's more distractions and it's bad for them. Like that has happened before. So home court advantage, as far as a isolated match is concerned, gray area. That said, the advantage that players have growing up in the Grand Slam nations is the money that the federations end up acquiring as a result from those massive commercial events. And that money they are then able to funnel into the developmental cycle and all of the resources. Like if the USTA will provide their top juniors with training facilities and a traveling coach potentially, they will they will try to make sure that there's plenty of opportunity to compete at the futures level domestically. All of these things take investment, and the USTA is able to make these investments because the US Open is a massive piggy bank. That's where you get unfair advantage. More so. I don't think wildcards are quite as significant, although, of course, it can be meaningful for a player to get some wildcards, especially early on in their careers. But that, to me, is minuscule compared to the developmental advantages that the Grand Slam nations have through money. I don't think there's a solution to that, though. I'm drinking delicious coffee. Shout out Evans Brothers Coffee, official coffee of Monday Match Analysis. Got a link and a discount code in the description. This is a Kenyan washed coffee which is my favorite, my absolute favorite. From Madonna, thoughts on Victoria Mboko? Already been a while since that Masters win, but I would really like to hear you talk about her game, her strengths and weaknesses, maybe her potential as well. I'm going to tread somewhat lightly because I hadn't seen her until Canada. So, I watched probably 2 matches. But what really stood out to me is her physical tools and her well-roundedness. So, first off, I don't think there's one thing that is blow you out of the water. But there was a really great balance to her attributes from a movement standpoint, consistency, power, serve, kind of seemed good at everything. You were watching it, you're like, you're pretty good at everything. But one thing that kind of stood out is super compact strokes, way more compact than most on the WTA Tour, way more. And the ball still goes. That's a level of kind of fast twitch strength that struck me as pretty special. And that's a nice advantage. Obviously, it's so much easier to time the ball, so much easier to take the ball early when you don't have big elaborate backswings. And Mboko is very, very compact. And then, boom, she can snap the ball with a lot of power from that kind of short runway. And that's super valuable. That gives her the ability, I think, to play precision offense and suffocating tennis in a way that, again, can be really, really impactful. Moves well for her size as well. And obviously the height bodes well for her serving potential long-term. From Alex, hi Gill, you often quote average distance to the line as a measure of serve accuracy. This statistic seems problematic because it is a function of both accuracy and target. I guess that Zverev would be inaccurate by this measure just because of his conservative placement. Have you had any thoughts/discussions about alternative metrics? Perhaps something like standard deviation from the mean for each serve type. Well, first of all, you're right. Zverev is inaccurate by that metric, or at least he's bang average from an accuracy standpoint. But that's why, you have to take both numbers. You can't just look at one. You've got to look at both numbers. I don't think there's a way to synthesize everything into one number, but if you look at Zverev being, by one metric, the most accurate server in the world, and that one metric is first serves in percentage, but then if you look at the other metric, which is average distance to the line, take away body serves, average distance to the line, and you see that he's dead average, well, your answer is somewhere in the middle. Whereas if you look at Hubert Hurkacz, who average distance to the line is tops, right up there with Djokovic, but also serves a good percentage. Or if you look at Djokovic, whose average distance to the line is tops, but also serves a good percentage, those are your more accurate servers than Zverev. But Zverev is accurate in his own way. So what you have to do is you have to look at both numbers. You can't just look at one. And then, then I think you come to your answer, which is how does this player actually serve, which is ultimately what we're trying to figure out by looking at the metrics. From Triana, I really need a third or fourth guy to be in contention for slams. We all think Shelton could be that player. What does he need to train over the winter to take that next step towards Carlos and Jannik? Also, am I right to abandon all hope for Holger? No, don't abandon all hope. I mean, you look at his age, you look at where he's at. Would you like to see a way better rate of improvement? Absolutely. Have things stagnated on him? Yup. Do I have Rune as a shoe-in, as a future top 5 mainstay? No, I do not. But abandoning all hope is way too extreme. I mean, he still has some pretty special attributes. He's still a very talented shot maker, a very good mover. And whether it be some weapon building or solidifying his identity or solidifying and taking a leap in terms of fitness, there are a lot of opportunities for Rune to start to realize his potential in a much bigger way. So wouldn't abandon all hope. You're asking me about what Shelton needs to do, or could he be that player? He could be that player. He could. I see Shelton more likely as somebody who has a chance to steal a couple if he's able to kind of do what he needs to do. I don't think he has the makeup of ever consistently competing with Alcaraz and Sinner, given movement, backhand, and return and defense. Okay. Like for all of those things to get good enough where he can compete with Alcaraz or Sinner just seems impossible. I actually want to go back to numbers on this. Tennis Insights did a very interesting series looking at the top 10, the current ATP top 10, and what some of their advanced metrics tell you in the last 52 weeks. Shelton was dead last in baseline points won. He was actually the only player below 50% in baseline points win percentage at 47.5%. So that really tells you that between his backhand and his movement, he's not competing from the back of the court as well as he ultimately will need to. And then maybe you could put a little bit of blame on just the reliability of the forehand, but overall I think it's more down to the backhand and the movement. Net points won, Shelton was also dead last by a lot, although I do think he forces his way forward a lot more than anybody else in the top 10, maybe other than Alcaraz, who has the best volleys on tour, so he can kind of obviously protect that win rate a lot better than Ben. And then opponent net points won. Shelton was also dead last among top 10 players, 25%, which to me tells you, look, Shelton is the only guy in the top 10 where part of the game plan is literally go to this wing and come in. Make him pass you on the backhand. Although I wouldn't mind approaching Hachanov's forehand either. That also might reap some rewards. Anyway, look, so there are a lot of holes. But the fact that Shelton is in the top 10, is a top 10 player, and has had the success that he's had, despite scoring so poorly in some of these metrics, speaks to just how great his serve is, how big his serve is. And I think everybody sees with Ben, other than the serve, there is more to work with. There's far more to work with as far as being like an all-around dominating, attacking, and offensive player. He's never going to be a great defender, I don't think, or a great baseliner. But I think you could build a version of Shelton who is so dominant in his first strike tennis that he's able to compete at the very highest level. And that's what he needs to build, while just clogging up the holes so that he's more respectable as a serve breaker. Like Taylor Fritz. Like Fritz has become respectable as a serve breaker. He's not up there. He's not with the other guys in terms of breaking serve frequently, but he's respectable. That's where Shelton needs to try to get. Which WTA player do you think is most likely to win their first slam in 2026? Andreeva, Anisimova, Pegula, someone else? I think Andreeva. Andreeva is the player who really for the last couple of years, it's felt like 2026 on her trajectory is the year in which she wins one. I felt that almost all throughout the year that she'd probably win a slam in 2026. So, hey, I'll put it down. It's a prediction. Andreeva wins a slam in 2026. That's how likely I think it is, that I would go as far as to predict it. Because this year, it feels like the physical development is happening very quickly. She has a really underrated serve, terrific court sense, great positioning in and out of the court, superb backhand, probably can get a little tight on the forehand and get passive off of that wing. So that's something that she can work on. But what do I think has really held her back this year? It's just the emotional maturity in some of these big matches. You know, the Louis Besson match in Paris, the Taylor Townsend match in New York. I just feel like as soon as she starts to handle her emotions better in big matches, she is already good enough to win a major. I think the level is already there. I could also see it for Anisimova. I mean, it's hard to say otherwise after she's made back-to-back major finals and shown unbelievable resilience coming back from the Wimbledon final beatdown. From Ravi. Hi, Gill. I hope you are having a good time. Longtime fan of the show and have learned a lot. I wanted your opinion on whether Carlos will at some point stop having his movement advantage over Sinner, especially as he gets older, similar to Rafa, who wasn't much of a challenge in hard courts to Fed and Novak post-2015. I feel Sinner's game is something he can maintain long-term and will reap rewards down the line. Please share your views on this. Thank you. Wouldn't be, first of all, it's so early to have this conversation. I wouldn't be concerned about Alcaraz long-term because his skills, his racket talent, and his offensive capabilities can absolutely facilitate winning tennis if he loses 5, 10, 15% of the movement he possesses. He will absolutely, I think he has the potential to develop in other areas in order to make up that loss. And that's what we've had to see players do in order to sustain success into the mid and especially late 30s. The big three, they all did it brilliantly, all three of them. I think Alcaraz can do it as well. Where you end up seeing, what ends up being concerning is when you have a player like Zverev or Medvedev. When they start losing physicality, it's like, they don't have that point shortening DNA. It's not really in them. And that's where it becomes, Medvedev even more so than Zverev, tough to see them being competitive when they lose their physicality, right? Ferrer, if you lose your physicality, I don't see Alcaraz as one of those players. Last question from Philip. Hey, Gil, thanks for the amazing work you do. You aren't recognized enough. Thank you. I had a quick question about Tsitsipas. Before the U.S. Open, I was in Winston-Salem the day before he lost to Yun Kete and watched him on the practice court. He was visibly frustrated throughout the duration of his practice session, and even at one point loudly yelled in English, "How is this possible?" after he missed a shot. Then, of course, he lost second round in New York. With as frustrated and burnt out as he appears and the lack of any good results at all except for Dubai back in March, is this a decline that Tsitsipas is ever going to come back from? Curious as to your thoughts about the future trajectory of his career from here. And then he just lost to Fonseca at Davis Cup in Athens. That couldn't have felt good either. There are reports that Tsitsipas has taken medical intervention finally on his back. Some have called it a surgery. Others have refuted that categorization, but definitely some sort of an operation. So, okay, that's good. But ultimately, there are probably some more, deeper systematic problems with Tsitsipas. It would really surprise me if there's some sort of dramatic turnaround in Tsitsipas's career trajectory, especially a return to the top 10 would really surprise me at this point. I just think that the flame has burnt out. That's my read on the situation overall. And over the course of tennis history, it happens. It happens. And I think there's a multitude of reasons, some probably being the dynamics off the court and some being what's happened on the court that have discouraged Stefanos, that have made it difficult for him to believe that he can continue to chase the goals that he once chased. It's been this isn't just one little health-related bad stretch. There have been, I think, a lot of worrisome signs since 2023. Like, since he kind of had, the worst, you'd say, he made that Australian Open final to start the year. And then I think the rest of the year, you could see things kind of slipping a little bit for Tsitsipas. In 2023, after the Australian Open final. 2024, he had Monte Carlo. And then outside of that, it wasn't great. You could see it slipping from what it once was. And now 2025, where it's really taken a nosedive, and he's just a little bit over 50% for the year. His health hasn't cooperated. His fitness hasn't cooperated. He's had more drama off the court. So yeah, that's almost going on 3 years now where things just haven't looked like they did when he was at his best. 3 years is a long time, and that doesn't mean it's permanent, but it means it's probably a long-term trend and not a short-term hiccup. All right. Unfortunately, ending on that note, but looking forward to 3 after Laver Cup. Enjoy, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this mailbag. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.